You know that person who has kept the exact same haircut for 20 years. Same part on the same side. Same length they always ask for. The barber or stylist who doesn't even need to ask anymore, who just nods because they already know the order by heart. Pull out a photo from 15 years ago and somehow the hair looks almost identical. The face got a little older. The hair stayed loyal. Meanwhile, everyone around them keeps reinventing. New color every season. New style after every breakup. New look for a new chapter, a new job, a new version of themselves. And every so often, someone looks at that unchanged hair and asks the same question. Why don't you switch it up? Try something new. You'd look great with a change. What's interesting is that many of these people absolutely could change it. They just don't want to. And psychology says that decision has very little to do with hair. Because keeping the same haircut for 20 years says something much deeper about the person in the mirror. Modern culture is obsessed with reinvention. New year, new you. New season, new look. The makeover is one of the most repeated stories we tell ourselves. Cut your hair and change your life. Transform your appearance and transform who you are. Everything today is built around the idea that the current version of you is a draft, and the real you is always one upgrade away. Advertising thrives on this. The beauty industry doesn't profit from people who feel settled in their own skin. It profits from restlessness, from the quiet belief that you'd be better, newer, more lovable if you just changed something. A person completely at peace with their own reflection becomes almost impossible to sell to. And appearance became one of the loudest status signals in modern life. People don't just style their hair anymore. They communicate identity through it. Relevance, youth, taste, the sense that they're keeping up. Researchers studying self-image have long found that people often modify their appearance not for themselves, but to regulate how others perceive them. In simple words, a lot of reinvention isn't really about wanting change. It's about needing to be seen as someone who is still evolving, still current, still in the game. That's why constant reinvention can become addictive. Not because the new look changes your life, but because for a few weeks it changes how you feel about yourself. And this is where the person with the unchanged haircut becomes psychologically fascinating, because they quietly step out of that cycle. They stop using their appearance as emotional proof. That same haircut becomes evidence of something rare. A stable sense of self. Think about it. Most people today are surrounded by constant change. Bodies change. Trends change. Relationships change. The face in the mirror slowly changes year after year whether we like it or not. The human brain was never built for this much instability about who we even are. And psychologists have known for decades that people instinctively reach for familiarity during times of stress and uncertainty. Familiar things reduce mental load. Familiar routines calm the nervous system. And there is almost nothing more familiar to a person than their own reflection. Keeping the same haircut means that every single morning, the face looking back is the face you expect. There is a quiet stability in that. A small, daily reassurance that you still recognize yourself. In psychology, this connects to something called the mere exposure effect. The more familiar something becomes, the more comfortable and attached we naturally grow toward it. Not because it is objectively better, but because familiarity itself feels safe. Your own appearance is the thing you are exposed to more than anything else on earth. Over 20 years, that particular reflection stops feeling like a style choice. It starts feeling like simply you. And changing it can feel less like a haircut and more like losing a piece of who you are. There is also a memory layer most people never think about. That haircut was there through everything. It was there at the wedding. It was there in the hospital waiting room. It was there in the graduation photos, the job interviews, the ordinary Tuesday mornings that quietly added up to a life. Researchers studying autobiographical memory have found that our sense of identity is deeply tied to continuity, to feeling like the same person across time. That unchanged hair becomes a thread that runs through every chapter. A constant in a life full of variables. So when someone refuses to change it, they are sometimes protecting more than a style. They are protecting the feeling of being one continuous person, not a series of strangers wearing the same name. This is also why people who keep the same look for decades are often less driven by external validation. And that is becoming increasingly rare. Social media turned appearance into a performance that never ends. Every photo is a presentation. Every new look is content. Even aging became something people feel pressured to fight in public. But eventually, some people grow exhausted by all of it. Exhausted by performing freshness. Exhausted by reinventing themselves on schedule. Exhausted by the unspoken rule that staying the same is the same as falling behind. And something shifts psychologically when a person stops needing strangers to be impressed by their reflection. They become much harder to influence. That is why some people keep the exact same haircut even after they could afford any stylist in the world. The hair stopped being connected to their self-worth a long time ago. And honestly, many people secretly admire that. There is something strangely calming about a person who clearly isn't chasing the next version of themselves. Researchers studying appearance and well-being have consistently found that people with lower attachment to image-based validation tend to report higher self-esteem and lower social comparison anxiety. Because comparison is exhausting. There will always be someone who looks newer, younger, more put together. That race never ends. The person who keeps the same haircut for 20 years quietly steps off the track. And maybe that's why people question them so much. Because deep down they represent a freedom from a game most people are still trapped inside. Now, of course, not everyone keeps the same haircut because they have reached some deep inner peace. Sometimes it is just habit. Sometimes it is simply easier. But even then, psychology still matters, because something else happens as people get older. They stop chasing stimulation and start chasing simplicity. A new look means new decisions, new maintenance, new uncertainty about whether it even suits you. The familiar style already fits seamlessly into life. No learning curve. No risk. No quiet anxiety every time you catch your reflection. And after years of decision fatigue, many adults begin organizing their lives around reducing mental noise instead of maximizing novelty. Researchers studying cognitive overload have found that the sheer number of choices we face every day drains mental energy and raises stress. So removing one recurring decision, like what to do with your hair, is not laziness. It is conservation. The funny thing is that modern culture often mistakes consistency for stagnation. If someone keeps the same look, people assume they have given up, stopped trying, stopped caring. But psychologically, staying the same in a world obsessed with reinvention often takes more confidence, not less. Because keeping your own look means becoming comfortable disappointing a culture that constantly tells you to change. That is hard. Keeping the same haircut in a world addicted to transformation quietly says, I don't need to become someone new to feel like enough. And there it is, the question hiding underneath all of this. The world keeps telling people they should always want to refresh, update, reinvent, become a better version of themselves. But eventually some people reach a point where they ask a quietly dangerous question. What if I don't need to change to be worthy? What if the person I already am is enough? That question changes everything. Because once someone genuinely feels enough, the entire machinery of reinvention culture loses its grip on them. And maybe that's the real psychology behind people who keep the same haircut for 20 years. It is not vanity. It is not laziness. It is not a fear of change. Sometimes it is a stable sense of self. Sometimes it is attachment to memory. Sometimes it is exhaustion with comparison culture. Sometimes it is quiet confidence. And sometimes it is simply a person who looked in the mirror one day and finally stopped trying to become someone else for everybody watching. To most people, it's just hair that never changed. But to the person in the mirror, it represents something much bigger. Continuity, stability, memory, self-acceptance. In a world constantly trying to convince people they are one transformation away from being enough, keeping the same haircut for 20 years might quietly be one of the strongest signs that someone finally stopped searching for their worth in the mirror. Before you go, I want to ask you something. How long have you kept the same haircut? And honestly, would you ever truly change it?